I went to my girlfriend's house in a neighboring state by hitchhiking. It wasn't very easy to catch cars, and it was late in the evening. On the highway at night, everything is completely different from during the day. You never know what can happen. While I was thinking like that, a car stopped a little ahead. I drove off at a light trot, and thanking the driver from the bottom of my heart, I sank into the cozy seat with pleasure. We exchanged a few phrases with the driver. I didn't ask for his name, so I'll call him that. Then we drove in silence. It is clear that the driver himself was tired on the road. He slowed down, turned the radio on, found nothing, turned it off, found nothing, turned it off. And I'm sitting, thinking about the friends I was driving from, about the girl, in general, about something of my own. Half asleep, I look at the bright spot from the headlights, which periodically pick out bright road signs from the darkness. There weren't any oncoming cars for a long time. The sky is only far, far bright, and here night has already descended above us. I look at this yellow spot on the road, and have probably been asleep for a long time, because I saw a gray figure far ahead on the road. The gradually increasing figure stood on our side, but the car did not slow down. It even seemed to speed up. Without turning my head, I looked at the driver. His face was frowning. His eyelids were half closed, but he was clearly not asleep. I look at the figure again. It is already clear that it is a man in a gray coat, and something dark is put on his head. He was facing us. I already started fidgeting in my seat and taking a deep breath to say something, only, right in front of the hood. The man disappeared. There was no knocking. No detour. There was nothing. The car was going straight on and on. I feel like I'm sweating instantly. I'm sitting there, not moving. The driver is silent, and so am I. After all, I think I dreamed about the figure, and before the collision, therefore, I woke up. In general, I decided to keep silent. Why bother the driver with my incomprehensible dreams? A few minutes later, the car slowed down and gently pulled over to the side of the road. They stopped, turned off the engine, and the driver got out. Me too. He looked back at the road, quietly and deeply inhaling the cool night air. Then he said, in a noticeably hoarse voice, "A regular bus overturned here. A couple of months ago, people died, and now they walk like this. It's not the first time I've seen it. Let's go." I got into the car in silence, and we moved on. I didn't sleep again that night. I just remember later, owls, a lot of owls, were sitting on the road. Our headlights were shining in our eyes. I used to work in a taxi in my own car. These days were just empty. There were few orders. I barely scraped together money for a daily plan, and for gasoline, the weather interfered. The downpour was so heavy that it was dangerous to drive a car. Visibility was zero. It was watered all day along the avenues of the river. The horror is complete. Rarely anyone needs to go anywhere. Nevertheless, I managed to earn money during the day. But since my friend and I had agreed to drink beer a few days ago, I had to go out at night, and there were almost no taxis in the city. In general, the anticipation of earning money was higher than spending the last one and then earning again. Jason, my friend, went with me that night. I often took him with me at night. There are a lot of scumbags in our city. Drug addicts and just morons. We are sitting in the car, drinking coffee, telling jokes, and we're about to go home, when suddenly a man walks from the opposite side of the avenue. It was very hard to see, but it was noticeable that he was clearly drunk and walking towards us, barefoot. I didn't expect anything from him. Usually, such people without money ask for a ride. But when this man came up to the car, I was a little taken aback. She was a woman who had drunk well, with loose black hair, about 60 years old and in black clothes, walking barefoot through cold and dirty puddles. In general, I asked to take you to one village. Of course, I was blown away by this amount. It's half the price to get to that village. But she said something like, "The weather is bad and you're tired." I jokingly told her, "Okay, let's go." We drove for 30, 40 minutes. I only knew the road roughly. I had never been to those parts. And there is such mud there that you can't even call it expensive. Everything was washed away. The rain was pouring even harder. Bushes, trees, and cliffs flashed in front of the hood. I drove, barely managing to dodge the car from colliding with this outrage. The road is like a snake with many branches and intersections. We drove with grief in half to this village. The grandmother paid and told us to return by the same road, and disappeared into the night, splashing bare feet in the mud. Jason and I also had a laugh. The rain became a little less, and Jason asked to drive. I sometimes let him ride in villages or on long trips, so this time we moved home. I leaned back in the passenger seat and lit a cigarette, wondering where it would be better to buy a beer. The music was playing loudly, which added to the adrenaline. 10 minutes later, Jason suddenly stopped the car and said that the road was over. I sat up and saw grass in front of the headlights. I can't understand anything. The downpour is back, getting stronger, and even the windows are fogged up. Nothing is visible. I opened the door, a crack to at least get my bearings, where to turn around, and then the lightning flashed. Bright, long. Honestly, I ducked a little, and behind the door I saw grave crosses, monuments, and fences. I was shocked how we got here in the first place. I had a little fight with Jason. He was obviously offended, but I had to apologize since the road is really almost invisible. I should have gone back myself. But what can you do now? We moved, in general. And I, trying to pull back, felt the car pull off the track into a hole, and it rests its rear wing against someone's fence. I don't need to scratch the car yet. So, back and forth from the swing, I tried to align it for 20 minutes, maybe a little less, and all without success. When suddenly, Jason quietly says, "Turn on the high beam, please." And I can hardly hear him, because my door was ajar, and I was looking back, trying to leave, and even the sound of rain. I was already soaked, and decorative flowers were floating next to the car, torn off by gusts of wind from wreaths. It makes you feel uneasy at all, just like a shallow, dirty river under the car. There was water almost to the door. Slamming the door, I turned on the high beam, and my body just felt like cotton wool from what I saw. We sit together and watch as two objects in the form of people, completely black, approach us about 20 meters away, and they move over the grass without touching it at all. The rain had just subsided a little, and I could see it in detail. Even though I'm an adult guy, I felt such fear that I thought we were going to die here right now. Either tears rolled in their eyes, and both at once, or the rain from a wet head got into their eyes and stung, as in childhood, after a grudge. In general, I gathered all my strength and turning on the reverse gear, pressed hard on the gas pedal, not thinking at all about the consequences. Having scratched the car along the entire length, we raced in reverse quite fast. Since I was trying to see at least something in the mirror in flashes of lightning, catching some outlines of the dead road with my eyes, I did not have time to notice how they were already at the hood of the car. The headlights with the high beam turned on did not penetrate through them. They seemed to absorb the bright light. The headlights shone inside them. After a couple of seconds, the wheels of the car caught on the embankment road, and we were abruptly turned backwards towards these creatures. They fell behind pretty quickly. We drove very quickly towards the city, not afraid of huge puddles that the car might just stall from water getting into the electrics. I was looking in the mirror, and Jason turned to the back window, and in the flashes of lightning, we saw those two standing suspended in the air, a meter above the ground between the birches, moving further away from them. We disappeared around a bend. Our heart was beating so hard that it was ready to jump out at any second. When we returned, we naturally bought a lot of beer and sat until the morning, discussing what had happened. Even my wife asked me not to work in a taxi anymore, which I eventually did. But that night was simply incomparable to any of the scariest and most psychologically difficult films. Still remembering her, my legs go numb as they did then, and goosebumps run down my back, especially when I realized that they saw us too.